Buenos dias, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the In Between Podcasts. I'm Jake.
And I'm Leah.
And our guest today is Dr. Kate Russo.
Hello.
Hello.
G'day.
Yeah, a proper, what was the response? You said a proper Aussie.
A proper Aussie.
Because I believe when we first made contact with each other via email, I said, good day or...
Yeah, that's really bad.
Good day.
You got to practice that. It's g'day.
G'day. G'day, mate.
I'm learning the y'all.
Yeah. Australia, and you're from Australia.
Yeah.
Sorry, folks should I should say that way folks can kind of get some context. But you're here in Texas, and you came down for the annular eclipse that we had here at Concan, Texas. That was on October
The 14th. It seems so long ago. It's just a few days, but
yeah, it does. It does feel like a long time. And I was thinking, Aussies and Texans have some common things about the misconceptions about the both. Like, people think about Texas and that they have never been here, and they think that we all ride horses. And,
oh yeah,
and wear a belt with a holster and bullets and guns, like the Wild West movies. And I know, like, for the longest time, whenever I was growing up, I used to think people in Australia were like Crocodile Dundee. That's probably not everybody, but there's certainly some people who probably think that about Aussies.
Yeah.
Is that something you get?
Yeah.
Really?
Well, where I'm from in North Queensland, people are a little bit like that. Like farmers do wear the khakis, or like the blue. That's just the farming uniform that people wear.
Oh, okay.
And we do tend to talk like that. So there's a little bit of truth in that.
Well,
There's always a little bit of truth in some of the like stereotypes of like a country or a state. Like, there's a lot of cowboys in Texas too. You don't have to go far to find them, but we're not all cowboys.
And we don't all go get around in our horses.
Yeah. So Australian in Concan, Texas. What are you doing here?
Oh,
What?
it's because of this crossroads, right? So I live in Australia, but I am an eclipse chaser, and no matter where they are around the world, I will be there. So the last few years, I've been involved in national planning for this eclipse. So before 2017, I was part of the National Solar Eclipse Task Force, and we're helping coordinate all the efforts. And so I knew about this little crossroads area for a little while, and I hadn't actually been to Concan. My view of Texas actually was like the movie. It's exactly like you said. When someone said there was a river region, I was like, the what? There's rivers in Texas? I honestly didn't know. I hadn't heard about the hill country. And even, Jake, because it took me ages to learn the Texas Hill Country River region, because I would get that confused and I just didn't really get it. And so it's not really that well known outside of the US, I guess. Mm-hmm. So it's been really good to know what a magical part of the world this is, and how unique this particular area is in Concan. So I've really enjoyed learning a bit about it. So I tend to look at the path of totality, and I figure out where I would like to be to see eclipses and where I can help out the most. So when you reached out, which was, that was over a year ago?
Wow.
I know. And
when you said that in your talk on Sunday, I was like, oh, wow, it's been a long time.
Yeah. Short too, though. Like, a lot is, it's not that long before the total eclipse. But it just seems like forever ago.
Wow. So, one email and led you.
And here I am in your living room.
How did you get into chasing eclipses? Where did that passion begin? Because it certainly is a passion for you, and I can tell, and I mean everything that you're doing, all the work that you've done. Yeah, can you tell us how that happened?
Where it started? I guess it goes back to, it always goes back to your roots, right? And I grew up in rural North Queensland in Australia, and I loved learning about the world and all the things that were out there. And I knew from a very young age I wanted to travel. And, this was before the internet. You know about that. And we used to have pen pals. So I used to write to people all around the world, and I had about, 20 pen pals maybe.
Wow.
And I love getting mail and just learning about different cultures. And, we've got the most fabulous dark skies in Australia. We've got the southern sky, so I think it's even more spectacular, and very low light pollution where I grew up. So it was always magical. And there were a few eclipses growing up too. So I remember they weren't total eclipses, but, at school you'd be instructed to, do the pinhole projection on a box. So I remembered having the box, and I remembered seeing partial eclipses with my dad, and he'd have the welding goggles on that we could see. But it was just something that, when I left school, I knew that I wanted to travel a lot and experience all the nature events. So I had created a little bit of a list of what I wanted to do, the experiences I wanted to have, like skydiving. So I did that when I was young. And, so there's just things, and I guess people call it a bucket list, but I don't really like, it almost sounds like something you just tick off. But it's just something about embracing life and doing the things you want to do. So I guess that's the passion and the drive. And, then I started studying, because I'm a clinical psychologist, and I've done many years of uni. So, 4 years of an undergraduate, 3 years of a master's. And then after that, I took some time out backpacking. So I went traveling the world, got to the UK. And it was there that I started to hear about the path of totality that was going to go near there. So I thought, well, this is my chance to experience a total solar eclipse. I didn't know too much about it. I just knew that I had to get in the path of totality. And for me, I was living in Belfast, and so I had to get to the continent. So I selected the easiest place to get to, which was the coast of France. Didn't know anything more about it than that we just had to get into the path. And I remember on the day I was thinking, this is going to be really cool. It'd be really interesting. And we started watching it, and it was pretty cool and interesting, But the 10 minutes before, when things start to get really dramatic, you notice the changes of light. You really notice that things are shifting. The birds are changing their behaviors. Kind of like what you started just on Saturday there. You got to that point where after that, it gets really interesting. So it's even better than what you saw on Saturday. And so, it was getting to the point where I could see the darkening of the sky, and I could feel the temperature drop, and I could feel the change. And instead of people just sitting, just chatting away and looking every once in a while, people were starting to stand up, and you couldn't just sit there. And, as more of the sun was covered, it just started to get really eerie. And then I just couldn't believe those last few minutes where it just suddenly changed. So many things happened all at the one time. And then it was quick, and then I had goosebumps, the hair on the back of my neck stood up, and I was just like, what on earth? I knew that we would be in this darkness, but I actually was not prepared for how it feels, I didn't know anything about that. So there we were, the moon shadow passed across us, and I was standing there, and you look up, and it's like a hole in the sky, like you just can't describe it, and it's so beautiful. And it was everything, the crowd, and it was just this intense thing that I wasn't prepared for. And I can't even remember how long we were in totality for, but it felt like a lifetime. And then you could tell it was coming to an end. And so, you're sort of feeling like you're not ready for this to end. You just want to be in that moment forever. And then there it goes. The moon's shadow sweeps away. The light comes back. And then you're standing there feeling a very different person. There were people in tears around me. It was really very dramatic. And I turned to my husband and I just said, look, I don't know where the next one is, but we are going. We are so going. And it took me a few days to get back to my home to be able to research it. And that's the slippery slope, I was not expecting to, be transformed like I was. I was not expecting that I was going to see this again and again and again, but that's how it started.
Wow.
How many countries have you experienced an eclipse in since then?
Yeah, so I calculated this recently. It's 11 countries over 24 years, 6 continents. So the only continent I've not seen a total solar eclipse on is Antarctica. And I've had 2 close calls. So I think it was 2003. So I had already, my first one was 99, and then there was one in 2001, and then 2002, and then 2003 was Antarctica, and I was desperately trying to get there. It's expensive. It was. I tried every single thing. I tried working on these very remote cruise ships that take you to Antarctica. Actually, they weren't cruise ships. They were these Russian ships that go for weeks at a time. So I was just thinking, if I can work on one of these, I don't know, but I just exhausted all possibilities, and I just figured this one is not for me. So that was the first time I missed it. And then recently in December 2022, the path of totality was just not far from Antarctica, but the cruise ships that went down there were landing on Antarctica. And I was actually going to be on one of those leading a tour. And so that's a much easier way of getting to Antarctica because you don't have to worry about the cost then, do you?
Yeah,
But then COVID and then the pandemic and Australian borders closed and I just couldn't get there. So I'm just thinking, this is going to be my challenge. And my next chance at this, I can't remember the exact year, is it 2039? Something like that. I calculated I will be 67. Whatever year that is, I will be 67. So that is my last continent. I'm going to be there.
Nice.
I can't imagine what that would be like.
I know.
Just talk about dark skies, and just, I don't know.
Yeah. But every country, every place has been unique and different and wonderful. And I just love how, it's not the same thing that happens because you can be in a position where it's at sunrise or at sunset or in the middle of the day or, late afternoon. And then you can be in elevation or you could be in crowds or on your own or, so much variability. Freezing cold, heat, desert.
Freezing cold. Have you ever experienced one alone or has it always been with a crowd? And if so, do you have a preference? Is one more magical than the other for you?
Yeah, I think they're different and each thing brings its own element. I've seen, my first was in a crowd and that was amazing. That vibe you get, the energy you get from the crowd is incredible because part of the feeling is that you feel connected to something greater. You feel insignificant but connected. And so everyone around you, you sort of feel like it's you're just one big unit. And then I have experienced them on my own as well, just myself and my hubby and maybe one or 2 other close friends. And that's been really special too, like something very special because especially if you're in a place where there's, I'm thinking of Mongolia here. We were up on a hill and I was part of a very small tour group, but we removed ourselves and we were up there and nowhere could we see anything man-made. I just loved it. There weren't any roads, there weren't any power lines, there were no houses. It was just landscape and nature, and it was just happening right there in front of us. And that was really very special because I had that feeling of being transported in time, that time was irrelevant. It didn't, there was nothing that indicated you were at that year. I think it was 2008. Nothing that indicated that I was in that year. I could have been 3,000 years ago, being a human being and standing in that place, having that same feeling of, oh my God, the sun is disappearing. What's that all about? And the weird thing about that one was moments after totality, this family appeared from nowhere. I don't know where they came from.
Time travelers.
Maybe. It opened a portal to the universe and there they were. But, we didn't speak their language. They didn't speak us. But there's something about the experience. People come together. So we were able to share photos and we had filters that they could use. And it was just really special.
Wow. So they were native to the area. Wow.
Up a hill, random. I don't know where they came from.
They're probably wondering, like, what are you doing here, time travelers? Like,
they must have thought we were brought there, because I don't know how they interpreted what was going on. But yeah, we just all flocked together.
wow.
Would you say that was your favorite total eclipse experience, or do you have another that tops that?
It's like, I mean, I don't have children, but I guess it's probably like when someone says, well, you know, who's your favorite child? It's like you can't really pick. Everyone is different and unique. There is something very special about your first one, though, because you think you know what you're going into, and it completely blows you away. So I don't think there's anything as special as having that moment of, you know, having your mind expanded in that way. But I love with the crowds. I love on my own. And each one is different. So there's no right way. And I interview lots of people after their eclipse experience. And their first time, they always say, oh, you know, mine was the best experience ever. Like, you know, I secretly found the solution and it's the best thing. But everybody says that. So the thing is that it doesn't really matter how you do it. It's okay. It will be perfect for you, and it will be enjoyable and wonderful.
Yeah. Well, we are going to be in our first experience here in about 6 months. So we're definitely looking forward to experiencing it. And after hearing you talk about it and reading what you've written about it, it's so enticing to want to experience it for ourselves. So I'm sure that time's going to come by really fast, because was it like 2 years ago when we first started to plan for this, or learn about it, I should say, because first we learned about it, then started to take steps to try to plan for it.
Did you know when you bought this place that you were in the eclipse crossroads?
Absolutely
No.
not.
We didn't know that, 3 years ago?
Yeah,
I don't know when we first heard. And somebody mentioned it, and we were like, oh, okay, yeah. And then maybe a year later is when Jake got on the task force, and then was living and breathed, to the point where I was like, I don't want to hear about the eclipse ever again. But then they hired an eclipse coordinator, because I mean, he was just so pumped and trying to explain and get everyone on board, and coming home talking about it, and like, we just had a baby. I'm like, I don't care. And then they hired an eclipse coordinator. I'm like, yeah, thank you. Because now I can get excited about it, because we talk about it, but then we also talk about other things. And I think too, like this last one was a test run, and kind of feeling the excitement behind that. Now I feel like, okay, I'm on board. I get it.
Yeah, you were wanting to go chase it down.
Hey,
you're like, all right, I already got it all figured out. If we can't see here, I think I'm gonna drive north and just
keep on driving. Yeah,
she was sold on the idea. Like, okay, let's go.
Yeah, he's like, I thought you didn't care, and I was like, well, now I do. So let's go chase it.
It's a matter of timing, isn't it? And perspective, because it can take over your life.
Yeah, like, for sure.
My hubby is I have now seen more than him, just circumstances. But our first few, we were the same place, same time, same moments. And he doesn't get as excited as I do. He doesn't have that intensity of feeling like I do. And he seems to get the buzz from watching me get excited, whereas when I get the buzz, it's kind of like that feeling, that all-encompassing, the roller coaster of all that intensity and awe and being wrapped up in that. So he always jokes, they're pretty cool, they're very exciting, but I wouldn't want to write a book about it. It's like, okay, I've written 3 books.
Oh, gosh.
Will you be working the one in April, or are you just experiencing, or both?
With totals, I always experience. So I try, the one that we had on Saturday, it's an annular. And to me, it's, I used to say it's just an annular, because it gets to the point where, 90% of the sun is covered. And that's a lot of the sun covered, but it's still bright enough that none of the really, really good stuff happens until after that point. I would never really give up and sacrifice totality to run an event, for example. So that's something I wouldn't do. I lead eclipse tours. And so what we do is normally, we get ourselves in position, and I always check that people's okay. And I normally do a fair bit of media up until about 15 minutes before, but I have a pretty solid rule on that, nothing more after that. I check on my tour participants, and then we all just do our thing. And then afterwards, I like just sharing that buzz and capturing people's little moments. And that's wonderful. But that totality, that's special. I don't photograph. I'm just there and breathing it in, taking the time. And to me, I always have that feeling that time stops, so it feels long. Whereas anyone who photographs, they will say, oh, totality just goes so fast. And it's because they're thinking about what they have to do and all the changes, and they've got to concentrate. So they I think they sacrifice that because they can't allow themselves to be caught up in that moment. But to me, time stops. And you've got a really long one coming too. I think you've got about 4 minutes, 26 seconds around here. That's at the park. So that's a long time. The one that I saw in April, I think we had 56 seconds from my site. It's quick.
And that was in Australia?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
It sounds like it's a very sacred space for you, and so you kind of bubble wrap it with some boundaries, and so you have your people, your tour, you make sure they're good, set the boundary, experience it, have that sacred space, and then debrief and share the experience.
Yeah. Although when you say it like that, it doesn't really, because there's a lot of sharing as well. So I'm not kind of in my own silent bubble. I am actually interacting and sharing, and so there is that, but it feels like everyone's in that moment. So as long as everybody's in that moment, that's kind of like sharing, and that's the thing. But I don't like when there's something that you have to, if you're preoccupied with having to keep one foot in your logical brain to figure it all out. So that's what I don't do. So I remember, it was the 2012 eclipse. It happened in my home region in Australia. And I was doing a fair bit of media then, and a radio station rang me straight afterwards because everyone was celebrating totality. And then they got me on the radio, and then they were asking me, so tell us about the psychology behind it. And I was like, I can't even think. I'm just celebrating. So it's just like, I don't even know what I was saying. I never really heard that one, but I was just living the dream. You can't connect your logical brain. You can't really have a serious conversation when you're in that zone. Yeah.
Wow.
So I guess you wouldn't have done what we did.
What'd you do?
We did not a good thing. We were at Garner, so we were going to drive to, and this was just random, and we ended up at Garner, and we were watching it there, and y'all put on the Ring of Fire, and everybody's cheering, and Jake and I are racing to the car, and I'm telling Jake, it's happening, Jake. No, it's not. We still have time. I was like, but they're cheering, Jake. And so everyone's looking up, and we're running through the parking lot, pushing the baby in the stroller.
Don't do that.
It hadn't started yet, but did the music start before it actually
There were a few,
started,
there was a bit of a premature triggering of that.
Okay. Well,
because I turned to them and said, what are you doing?
You were right.
But my timing was off because we probably should have left before then, because it still took us, it maybe happened 30 seconds after the song finished, if I recall correctly. So and then we left, right?
But I was like, Jake, stop, look up, because I knew by the time we wanted to see it from our porch, like we wanted to experience it from our porch, and I knew by the time we get here, the ring would be gone. I was like, you have to look up, you're gonna miss the ring. So we saw it.
What was the time on the ring?
11:50.
And then it was duration
4 minutes 55 seconds here. Okay. So when did you do the bolt? Do you know what time it was?
It was after the Ring of Fire song came on.
Probably around 11:50, right? Like at 11:50. So we were like
in the car
driving
almost.
No.
Okay, don't do that. Here's the thing: you get into position, you stay in position. There are some chasers who will be mobile the whole time, and they will try and look. And you know how the cloud was there, right?
Yeah.
They would have been stressing themselves out trying to find gaps in the cloud. We had the most interesting thing because there was just that perfect amount of cloud that covered it. It was like a natural filter, and it wasn't thick enough that it blocked the sun completely. So those few minutes before totality, you could before annularity, you could see it safely with the naked eye. Now that is against everything that we've been saying, right? Because I've been saying, at no point can you look at this with your naked eye, but the cloud was actually forming that filter. And it was spectacular. The clouds,
there's no way we would have been able to predict that was going to be the case. You can see it perfectly with your naked eye because the clouds provided the conditions to do so.
But quite a few people have said that, in different parts. And I've seen 2 annulars that have been in perfect clear blue skies. And to me, they were interesting. They didn't have any of that excitement or that magical feel. Like there was something very different about that because of the cloud. And you could view it just briefly with the naked eye. You have to be very careful. So, I'm not saying everybody should do this, but I've seen quite a few now, and I knew that was safe. But you had to be very prepared, and you look away, like you're glancing at it. But the clouds actually made it special. It made it. So don't do what you do. God, that's terrible.
We learned our lesson.
No, I did it once before in actually 2012, and it was the only time that I had my family with me. So I had my mum and dad and my sister and brother, and we had there were 3 vehicles. And we were in this location over a dam, and I should have known actually, over water, that if there's water there and the temperature cools because the sun is covered, the sun is being covered, the radiant heat from the sun reduces over time, and then it actually does get cool, and those local circumstances can form cloud. So cloud was forming, and I really should have thought about that. And then it was getting thicker and thicker, and I thought, oh no, this is not good. But I couldn't make that decision. And my dad was there, and you normally would defer to your dad to make the decisions. I'm like, and he's looking at me saying, do we need to go? What do we need to do? And I'm like, I don't know, you tell me. But in the end, we did. We bolted, and we only had to drive 5 minutes just away from that little area. And then we saw it, and it was the best thing that we did, that we moved. But we still had 15 minutes. And even then I thought we were cutting it fine. So you guys probably missed the key thing.
Yeah, we saw it from the car, and so it kind of was like, it was like, God, like it felt like, I don't know, we're chasing a dinosaur. It felt fun, but it didn't feel like, what? It felt like, but it's that thrill and excitement, right? But you had that, so that's cool. It was fun.
Yeah. I don't know how to just articulate the feeling of what you were just describing, but that's kind of what we were feeling too during the time. Like, should we leave? Should we stay? There was that inner struggle. And
no one can tell you.
No one can tell you, no, because you don't know what's gonna happen. And had we just stayed put, then we probably would have been just fine, perfectly fine. But I mean, in your case, y'all moved, and it was perfect. Perfectly fine.
And I knew that was the local circumstance, so I knew that was fine. But for an annular, we wouldn't chase, like, I don't normally chase annulars, but for a total, I think if I was looking at the weather 2 days before, because how over time it was sort of shifting, right? And most of the chasers were actually heading up to New Mexico and Utah, because lots of national parks and some amazing landscapes, and they historically have the best chance of clear skies. And so they were all heading up there. And about 5 or 7 days before, the forecasts were starting to shift, right? And it was all cloudy up there, and pockets of Texas were looking really good. So then the chat was like, okay, everyone's coming to Texas. And then it was about 2 days beforehand where things shifted again. It was like, well, Texas is looking a little bit cloudy. So I was keeping in regular contact, and they were all stressing. And I'm sitting there going, there's something to be said about, that you're not moving. So you don't get caught up in all that angst, because it's, you can't control the weather. But for an annular, that's okay. For a total, it's harder. Like I wouldn't pin myself down to a location. So if that had happened 2 days beforehand, I probably would have looked at going elsewhere just to give yourself the best chance, so we didn't have that full cloud cover like we did. But for the annular, it was great. But for a total, I wouldn't have liked that on the day. No. Clouds are not our friend on totality day.
So, well, I guess you could say that was a practice run. We were practicing, just in case we need to be mobile for the next eclipse in 6 months. So.
Well, here's the thing, because there's going to be so much more traffic, and you were able to bolt kind of quickly and up the road, but I suspect these roads are going to be quite tight and busy. And I don't know if you saw then, or maybe you guys started it, because as soon as after annularity finished, there was a bit of a max exodus. We were just looking at the other, looking across the viewing field, and everyone was just sort of walking to their car. It's like, wait for a group photo.
Yeah,
it's like half the field left.
Yeah, that was we were probably the first, if not one of the first, heading out from that area. But yeah, we and that's what I was trying to accomplish too, trying to get out and before people were leaving.
Yeah, but the thing is, everybody says that. Yeah. It's like any big game or whatever, any event, everybody sort of has that thing of, if we go now, we'll get ahead of the traffic. Yeah. But here's the thing, the traffic is actually going to be, if you look at what happened in 2017, it's not just local. Look at how wide the path is. The traffic, just think of every single little city, town, village, event. Everyone's doing the same thing all at the same time. It backs up. And it takes hours and hours. So, 12-hour traffic jam in Wyoming? It was, it was pretty epic. So it's that challenge when you're planning, because, you have a planning role now. You've got lodging here, and you want to advise people who are coming and staying with you. You really do have to look at discouraging people from doing that, because if you're sitting on the road for 12 hours, what do you do for food? What do you do for toilets? What do you do for medical emergency? It just creates all sorts of additional problems for everyone.
And all this, you go a lot more into depth about this stuff in your white paper, the books that you've written, which thank you so much for writing that, because it was such a great tool to have and resource for folks who are going to be experiencing this in their communities. And I'm just thankful the person before me had come across it and put it out there for us to kind of get eyes on it. I don't know. I'm guessing she got it from the Hill Country Alliance. Because they have been pretty instrumental in helping this area, the Hill Country area, prepare and plan for it and getting the information out there. They've been a great resource for that. So yeah, I do want to. I don't know who will see this podcast or hear it. Maybe it might be someone in a community, a couple of years down the road from now, who is going to be experiencing it. But where would you say the best place for them to find or get a hold of your white paper, which is all your research that you've done and that it talks about? I guess, why don't you tell us what it is, or give us a little summary of a little more about what it is.
Yeah. So I guess I recognized there was a need for something like that in 2012, because I started chasing in 1999, and my first 10 years I was pretty much just a chaser, a traveler, a chaser, and I would go into the path, have a great holiday, all of that, and then go home. Never even considered the impact on the local community. We'd enjoy and try and do cultural things, but it just wasn't even on my radar. And in 2012, the path of totality crossed North Queensland, where I'm from. And my home region was just outside of the path, so we weren't quite in it. And I was living in Northern Ireland at the time, so I actually came back for 6 months and stayed there. And my intention was, so I had just published my first book, and my intention was to gather research for my second book, where I was going to interview people before the eclipse, see what it was like, how they were preparing for it. And then interview them after their first total eclipse experience. And it was while I was doing those interviews, I realized that people were just not getting it. They didn't know that it was such a big deal. They didn't know it was going to happen. Everyone kept saying, oh, look, we're just being told it's a disaster and I'm going to rent my house out and I'm going to disappear. And I was like, no, don't do that. This is really important. And so I started to, nobody there in North Queensland had seen an eclipse before. And so, do you know when you're looking around and you think someone should be doing this, and then you're looking around saying someone should be doing this, and then you realize, hey, there's nobody around doing this, so you have to step up.
Yeah.
That, and that's actually one of the themes in my white paper, who's in charge?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're the one asking that question repeatedly, then it's you, I'm afraid. And I've said that to you earlier on. So I did what I could to actually help out, because people treat it like an event, and you have to, you've got to look at the impact. The eclipse is going to happen regardless of what, you could do nothing and it will still happen. But it's the impact of all these people coming in and how you get limited resources, and you have to just prepare people. And so after that experience on the ground, I interviewed the people who were involved in setting it all up and planning, and we did some hindsight lessons. And so I sort of used that to be able to inform how I was approaching the next things I was doing. And by that point, I started working with a tour company, and we were engaging with the Faroe Islands. So this was back in 2013, and the Faroe Islands were having their Path of Totality experience in 2015. So with the tour company, we flew there 2 years in advance, and I was learning that they only had 800 hotel beds, and they were, expecting a fair few people. And the minute we landed on the ground, people were hearing that this tour company was coming in, and that I had published a book. So we were getting inundated with requests to do talks and interviews, and then I realized, there is a need for a bit more guidance. So I was doing what I did based on what I learned from 2012. But I became far more involved, and I visited again a year in advance, and then I relocated 5 weeks beforehand, moved in. So I actually worked alongside the Visit Faroe Islands, and on the ground I was pretty much just saying, okay, here's what we need to do. We do this, and it was the best fun ever. It was just incredible, and it was I learned so much from them, because they were a tour, a national tour group, and they were very dynamic and had all these ideas. And I knew all the eclipse things, and on the ground, nothing was impossible. If I'd said something, they said, yes, we'll make it happen. And oh my God, it was just incredible. And from that, I made sure that we captured what we did, how we did it. And then that formed my first white paper about how you do that. And then we used that to inform 2017 planning across the US, because there was nothing really like that. So I distributed that all across the US, just the little lessons learned. And after 2017, I also then interviewed loads of coordinators across the path. The same thing again, I used an evidence-based approach. So I pulled out all the key learnings from that, and then that was the second edition of the white paper. So that's what you see, that's what you had got. I keep that available for free. That's available from my website, beingintheshadow.com. And it really just has the 3 core messages, assemble your team, develop your strategy, and boldly go where no one's gone before. And you can't do it yourself. You really have to have people around you to be able to support. But there's usually one person who's like the champion, who gets it going and tries to convince people. So I like helping and supporting that person so that they can go and support others. And you have to build on strengths on the ground. And small communities sometimes do the most amazing things. Big cities sometimes have all the people and committees, but sometimes they don't embrace it like small communities do. So I'm quite passionate to help out the smaller rural regional areas, probably because I'm a small community myself. So
yeah, that's good. Thank you for sharing that. I guess with the bigger cities, there's so much more people involved that no one's quite in tune with what the actual event is. Maybe because for whatever reason, but it's just a job. But here, I can speak for we live in a small community. It wasn't just a job for me. It was, I cared about getting the community informed and prepared. That was my ultimate goal, and why I kind of decided to take the charge in the beginning, which is definitely intimidating, especially for someone who, I don't have the best planning skills, and I have no really strengths when it comes to that type, assembling a team or being a leader. But I just had to do it. I feel like I had to do it because I didn't. If not me, then who else? Right.
Exactly. And it's that thing that, and maybe it's not so much it's not a false dichotomy of rural versus city. It's more an individual thing. So sometimes you'll find who it is that's passionate about it. And I think that's an individual thing where people can see this as either it's a threat, this is happening and, oh my God, we have to prepare and there's so much work, or this is an opportunity and, oh my God, this is going to be amazing. And if people get that sense that it's an opportunity, and also that if you see this as not a single event, that if you see that this is a stepping stone to help you and your community move forward beyond that, that's the way it is. So you can do amazing things and have a long-term legacy if you can see the opportunity. So there's some people, even without skills, where some people are just more tuned into thinking that way. So there you go, my friend.
Well, I should add that I had the help of who was really right beside me, but more in the shadows. Jamie, the president of the river region, she was instrumental in helping pull the Eclipse team together. So it wasn't just me. She was right there with me a lot of the time. And then some of the others started to come into play, like Haley and, now, Erica. Yeah.
And you can see, because I think people can see how this can be of benefit to the region. So it's not just, hey, we're going to be inundated and it's going to be chaotic, because that's sometimes the narrative that develops. But it's, hey, this is a unique opportunity. And, you've done a few things which were needed to be done anyway, like rebranding and figuring out how to kind of market the region. And, some of those things have not fallen into place. They've taken a lot of work. But these things are now... the Eclipse gives the focus, a focal point and a date that can't be shifted, because you can't say, hang on, universe, can you give us another 6 months or so? So sometimes you just have to, go with the time that you have. But, when you've got people who are in charge, if you've got leaders or, people in high authority who see that and give you permission to see the opportunity, it's so much easier.
Well, and it's such a great opportunity for our tiny little regional area to be on a much bigger platform, because we have all these people coming in from all over. And this is very much a Texas tourism area. Most of the U.S. doesn't even know about Concan and the river region.
Or the world.
It's Texan, yeah. And so for people from all over the world to be here, I kind of feel like we need to put on our, best outfit for the community, show everyone what we have to offer, because maybe people will want to come back and experience our dark skies and experience the rivers and
the culture and the food culture and the people who are here.
So,
and I think that's the distinction, isn't it? Because it's not about putting on events. It's actually the heart and soul of the community. And that's the thing that is conveyed. So, for example, we had the Solar Eclipse Village set up over the weekend in Ghana State Park. My goodness, those folk at Ghana, the rangers and Kelby in charge, the superintendent, they live and breathe the passion and the love of their park. That came through in every single interaction. That's the thing that people feel. That is so much more powerful than having a single event that people come and go and they might like or may not like. It's that heart and soul. And then if you're conveying all the other things that are here, like people are saying, wow, I didn't know there were so many bats around. And seeing a bat emergence is actually pretty cool. I've traveled to Borneo to see a bat emergence. They've got big caves in Borneo. And so there's this place where I think it's the Mulu cave system. where you go and you're sitting in the rain. You have to trek for a little while. You're sitting in the rainforest. They've got a little clearing and they've got places where you can just kind of sit and observe. And then at dusk, these bats. And it is the most mesmerizing thing. You know how bats sort of fly together and they're one? You know, they're all individuals, but they're kind of swarming and moving and then off they go. And talk about having that feeling of connection and unity. You know, you're an individual, small element, but you're part of something greater. And seeing that, wow. I mean, spectacular. So it's a thing. People do want to see that.
And the place you're referring to, that's in Australia?
Borneo.
Where's that at?
Indonesia.
I never heard of it.
Yeah.
So
see, that's one of my things that, you know, when I was younger, I kind of, there's all these things that I wanted to see and experience. And I'd heard about these cave systems in Borneo that have all these bats and that you can watch the bat emergence. So I can't remember what year it was, but we did it.
Did you get to see our bats here, or were they already gone whenever you got here?
Yeah, I haven't seen them here. Okay. Yeah, so I think there are bats around. And in fact, on Sunday we had Dr. Chris Ritzie from Sul Ross State University. He gave a talk on the reactions of bats, bees, insects, dung beetles. Turns out they're very receptive to changes in life. I know, that was a new learning for me. But he was talking about how, you know, the cave-dwelling bats may not be the ones to watch. So in terms of watching bat emergences, but actually the ones that are more roosting in trees, they would be very receptive to it.
Like the ones in Australia. The huge ones.
Wombat?
We do have... a wombat's not a bat.
Sorry, what are they called?
Sorry.
The fuzzy-faced ones. They were in a tree in a park behind our apartment when we lived in Australia.
Flying foxes, we call them.
They're cute. They were so cute and
They
fuzzy.
were huge.
They're pretty big. Yeah, because,
And just like in the park.
Yeah, they
in
hang
our
about.
backyard.
They roost in trees and they're everywhere.
That's where vampires come from.
Exactly. Yep. But I know you probably didn't say wombat, but it just made me realize wombat.
No, I said wombat. But I couldn't. Well, I don't remember the name. But they were big bats.
Yep. Yeah. You don't want to park your car under where they're stopping, by the way. Yep, they're a bit of a pest.
You know, this is a side note, but one of the things, because we lived briefly in Sydney, and when we first got off the plane and got into Sydney, one of the things that like tripped me out the most was just like the cockatoos everywhere. Yeah. Like we see those in zoos or people's homes, like, and they were just everywhere in the city. I think that blew my mind. That was like my favorite thing about Australia was the cockatoos everywhere.
Because at dusk, they kind of come around, like late afternoon, they come around and they all congregate and they make the most horrendous screeching noise. I mean, they're not pretty to hear.
Yeah.
But they're just part of life there. It's funny because it's all the things that you get used to and you take for granted, but actually those are the things that are of interest. So it's just all the little normal everyday things that you may not think are the interesting bits.
No,
that's what we like to see.
No, absolutely.
That's so true. We have our share of things that we take for granted, but we try to remind. Like one of them is living here in this beautiful area, but we try to remind ourselves of that and. When we're curving through the hills, and you know, we just tell each other, we'll look at each other and we're like, we live here.
Yeah.
Like, can you believe it? Like, we live here, because it is pretty incredible to live out here. You don't get the benefits of that come with the city, but there's other benefits that this area has to offer when living in a rural town area.
And this is unique because you've got a very strong tourist season, you know, like you've got for 6 months of the year, that's peak, and, you know, there's a lot of people around. And then for the rest of the time, it's off season. So, you know, there's things that people would still want to come to see and do and experience. And the
weather's great. I mean, the past couple of days have been like 40 to 60 degrees in the morning.
You missed our summer because that was a little...
It was a little hot.
No,
I was here in June.
You were... What? Oh,
yeah.
You got to experience it.
I did, but where I'm from, we actually do have the heat and humidity like that too. And it was the other day I stepped out of the little room there and I was like, come on, Texas, this is cold. Like, what am I doing? I had to go back and get a little jumper. I was like, what? It's Texas. But it's beautiful. And even on eclipse day, when we were all outside for those couple of hours, it was really pleasant because of the sun, because of the clouds. If that was a really clear, sunny day, this is what normally happens. I don't know. I've been chasing for 24 years or so. And I always forget that, the whole point is that you're standing out, watching the sun get covered. You're going to get burnt. You need a hat, you need your sunscreen and all that side of things. So it made it a very, very pleasant day. Pleasant.
It was. Yeah.
So before we close, what is next for you? Getting on a plane, going home, or is there something else exciting before that?
Well, I've been enjoying a lot of talking with everybody in the community. So I've been doing a lot of outreach, doing a lot of talks and just sharing the eclipse experience. And especially now that people have seen the annular eclipse and they know a little bit about how it all works and the process that goes through, so they can start planning for themselves. So I'm just in the process of finishing that. There's a few other planning things that need to be, done, and we've done it's been a bit of a blur putting together a weekend program. We had so many people coming, all these partners coming from across America, just coming to this region because they wanted to be here and share the experience with other people. So it's just a few of those things. But yeah, I'm heading home very soon, and there'll be a little lull, normal life, but obviously I'm still living and breathing eclipses because I'm quite involved in the national planning. And then I'll be back most probably I'll be back in March and then stay until the eclipse is over. So, but a lot to do before then.
Now, if someone is interested in your books, is your website the best place to get them, or Amazon, or where should they go? Yeah.
I'm such a terrible salesperson. I know I've got books I should sell, but I'm more about the outreach. So, here's the thing. I don't even know whether in the US you can order it from my website. How bad is that? I really should sort that out.
Email.
They can email you.
They can email you, and then you can coordinate.
But that's my job. Before I leave this country, I am going to figure out whether my understanding is that you can go online and order it in the US, and that that will be shipped to you. So I think that drop shipping is available. But I've got another 2 days before I go, and I have books here. So if anybody is wanting personally signed copies, I can do that for the next 2 days and then post them out to people. So I'll put that out. But yeah, I really need to sort that out. I have 3 books, and they should be available on my website.
Perfect.
Well, thank you so much again for taking the time to do this. You have been swamped with all kinds of stuff since you've been here, and it hasn't stopped even after the annular eclipse. So you've been really busy after that. So thank you for taking the time to do this, and we have enjoyed it, and can't wait to hopefully see you again for the next eclipse.
Yeah, I'll be here, and don't drive, don't do what you did before.
If anyone listened to this podcast, let that be the one thing that you take away. Do not get in your car and drive as it's starting. Just don't do that.
Unless you're us.
Yeah, even if you're you, don't do that. But, if there is one single message, it is that the annular is something that is interesting, but there is so much more after that point, and it does get dramatically different, and it gets fully immersive, and it does really rapidly change, and you are in a darkness that, it is very, very different. It is worth the experience, and don't miss it. Don't dismiss this as something that's, that's a small event. It's pretty significant. So make sure you see one.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for tuning in to this episode. We will see you on the next one. Hasta luego.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.